Hello YouTube and welcome to Full Dawdle, a channel dedicated to tamping topics such as pipes, tobacco, lure, and more. I am your host, the Bearded Briarman, and without further ado, let's get lit. Welcome back, everyone. And on this episode of Full Dawdle, I'm going to tell you a story about when I was around 16 years old. I grew up in a very rural area. We had a little farm, and it had 40 acres. Most of that was wooded acreage. So we had lots of exploration room. We would go out in the woods and do all sorts of stuff. We would build forts and camp out. Great childhood. But one day, I learned a very valuable lesson. The way my house was set up, you would come in through the entry and go through the main living area. My father's den was off to the left. There was a partitioning wall, an entryway into the kitchen, and then the rest of the house where my parents' bedroom and stuff like that was. The way it was set up, the kitchen was almost isolated except for the small entryway, and you couldn't really hear anything from the main living area or my father's den. Couldn't hear people enter. What was odd about it was the only thing that you could really hear was at nighttime. You could hear the slow creak of the wood stove lever that opened the wood stove. You could hear that creak from across the house. I guess it was just high enough pitched or something that it was easily audible. So, around 16 years old, around 14 years old, I began smoking cigarettes. At school, a group of us that were smokers would go around the back side of the school building, and we would sit as close as we could to the building and smoke our cigarettes at lunch to keep from being caught. One day, we were smoking, and I guess a teacher had saw us from one of the windows and reported us to the principal. As we were sitting there smoking without any warning, the principal comes around the building, sees us all sitting there smoking cigarettes, sits down beside us, pulls out a cigarette, and lights it. No one tried to run or even put out their cigarettes. We knew we had been caught. Now we were just curious what was going to happen. The principal looks at us all as he's smoking a cigarette and he says, "You know that smoking is against the rules on school grounds. However, you don't tell on me and I won't punish you for breaking the rules. With one exception. I want each and every one of you to bring me a note from your parents saying that they know you smoke and they allow it. If you do that, then I'll allow you to smoke on your lunch break, and I won't punish you." So, I go home, and I make a very difficult decision. I apologize. A little housekeeping. I'm smoking my Fantasia 7LE673, and in it, I'm finishing up that tin of Bayou Morning Flake. So I make a very difficult decision. I go home and I write the note out exactly how the principal wanted it formatted, and I wait. As soon as my parents come home, my father, when it was hunting season, he would, as soon as they came home from work, he would immediately change over into his hunting clothes, and he would head off to the woods and hunt until dark, right at nightfall. So I waited until my father left to go hunting, and I told my mother I needed to talk to her. I call her into my room, and I had a desk in my room that I did my homework and stuff on. I point to the letter and I said, "Would you sit down and read that, please?" In the letter, she reads what it says and she immediately begins crying. She didn't want me to take up such a horrible habit as smoking cigarettes. As a parent, I understand that now. But nonetheless, she signs it. I didn't dare tell my dad because I knew it would not go over well. My mother was not the disciplinarian. She was a wonderful mother, very loving woman, accepting in many ways, but she wasn't the disciplinarian. She was 4'11", and I think she tried to spank me once, and it just didn't work. So that's disrespectful, and I wish I wasn't like that as a kid, but I was a tough kid, tough to deal with. So she would tell me, "When your father comes home, I'm going to let him know." And most of the time when she said that, it was like, never mind, whatever I was doing, I'll immediately change my course of action. Just don't tell Dad. At any rate, she signs the letter. I take it back to school, and the principal was good on his word. Every day at lunch, we would go out and smoke a cigarette through the shop class, and the principal on most occasions would actually come out and join us to smoke a cigarette as well. One day I was about 16 years old, big tough 16-year-old, thinking that I know everything and that I've got the world on a string hanging from my little finger. My parents come home from work. My dad goes off to go hunting, and generally I would sit and smoke a cigarette in the kitchen with my mother. My mother was also a cigarette smoker. And she came around after a few years and lightened up, and I was able to sit and smoke with her when my father would go off to the woods. My mother had told my dad about what had happened, and my father made it very clear in no uncertain terms that smoking was simply not allowed. He knew he couldn't stop me when I wasn't, in his presence. However, if he ever did catch me, I would be in trouble. So I avoided my father when I would smoke. Generally, I would wait for him to go hunting, and I would sneak off, smoke a cigarette, smoke with my mom. Or if he was in the house, I would ask to go visit a friend or, what have you. On one day, I was about 16, and I was smoking a cigarette with my mother in the kitchen. Knowing I had a few hours before sunset, I had smoked quite a few watching her shows. We had a television in the kitchen that we would sit, talk, conversate, and watch the television. And the hour was getting late. It was close to sunset. I pulled another cigarette out to light, smoke. My mother says, "I don't think you should do that. Your dad will be home very soon." Being the big, bad, tough 16-year-old, thinking that I was a grown man, I look at her and I said, "You tell Dad. I'm 16 years old now, and I'll do whatever I please." And she looks at me and she says, "Son, I think you can tell him yourself." And she looks over my shoulder. I turned to look, and I'm pretty sure when I made eye contact with my dad, I died 3 times before he slapped the cigarette out of my mouth. And I mean, slapped the cigarette out. As soon as he had done so, he pointed to me and he says, "Outside now," and goes outside. So I follow. Every step was another moment of doom, waiting for what was about to happen. I walk outside with him. He goes midway into the yard, turns around, draws a line in the dirt, looks at me and says, "If you're a man now, man of the house, step across this line." So I made a decision. I bowed up, I turned around, and I went my happy ass back in the house. My father was a Golden Glove boxer in his younger days, and he was still very much somebody that could handle his own. And I wasn't ready for that, nor would I want to fight my dad. So deciding that I wasn't the man of the house, I was still punished severely. As a matter of fact, I think it was probably the worst punishment I had ever received. We had been spanked growing up, nothing like abuse or anything like that, but discipline, stern discipline, fair discipline. He didn't discipline me like that anymore. When I turned 16, I think the last time I got a spanking, I basically argued with him and got 3 more right behind it before he realized this isn't going to work anymore. You'd reached the age where you're starting to become a little bit stronger. But what he did do, he took away my vehicle, my driving privileges. I was grounded and confined to my bedroom, and he took the door to my bedroom off the hinges. And at 16 years old, for any of those males out there, you know that that door comes in handy at times. So for a full month, I wasn't allowed to leave my room once I got off the school bus, which riding the school bus when you were used to driving was horrible. I had no privacy because I didn't have a door. And I wasn't allowed to go anywhere, do anything, or drive anywhere. Absolutely horrible punishment. And I learned my lesson. I never smoked again in his presence until I was probably 19 years old, about to ship off for the Marine Corps. And eventually, luckily, quit smoking. Anyway, so moral of the story, if you ever think that you're the man of the house when you're not, you might get knocked down a rung to prove it to you. Anyway, folks, that's my story for today, and that's going to conclude our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up, show me some love, and until next time we see each other, I bid you farewell and happy piping. Bye, everyone. Have you enlisted in the Full Throttle Platoon yet? It's easy. Just click the subscribe button. Also, hit that bell icon to be notified as soon as I upload the next episode.